Top 5 Most Ruthless Kings in History. Throughout the long centuries of human history, kings and emperors have been remembered for many reasons. Some are celebrated as wise reformers, some as brilliant generals, others as visionary builders of nations. Yet, there is another category of ruler that history never forgets: the tyrants, the despots, the monarchs, whose names are carved into memory not because of their greatness, but because of their cruelty. Number 5. Leopold II of Belgium. Leopold II was born in the year 1835 in Brussels, the capital of Belgium. He was the eldest son of Leopold I, the founding king of the newly independent Belgian state. From childhood, he was surrounded by wealth, privilege, and the expectation of power. Yet those who knew him as a boy remarked that he was cold and withdrawn. While other children of noble blood delighted in games or hunting, young Leopold preferred to study maps and histories of empires. He dreamed of conquest and colonies, of expanding beyond the small borders of his homeland. In the year 1865, when his father died, Leopold ascended the throne at the age of 30. Belgium was a tiny country, squeezed between France, Prussia, and the Netherlands. To most Belgians, survival as a modest but prosperous state was enough. To Leopold, it was not. He felt humiliated that his country had no colonies overseas. He envied Britain, France, and Spain, whose empires stretched across continents. He resolved to carve out an empire of his own, no matter the cost. At first, Leopold's ambitions were frustrated. He tried to acquire territories in Asia and Latin America, but failed. Eventually, he turned his gaze toward Africa, which in the late 19th century was being carved up by European powers. He focused on the Congo Basin, a vast land rich in ivory, rubber, and minerals. To seize it, he created a facade. He established what he called the International African Association, claiming it was a humanitarian mission to abolish slavery, spread Christianity, and bring civilization. In reality, it was a mask for personal empire. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, European powers gathered to divide Africa. Through persuasion, bribery, and manipulation, Leopold convinced them to recognize his claim to the Congo. But it was not Belgium that received this vast territory. It was Leopold himself, personally. The Congo Free State, as it was called, became the private property of one man, a European king, sitting in Brussels, now owned a land 80 times the size of his country. What followed was one of the most brutal regimes in modern history. Leopold had no interest in governing the Congo for the benefit of its people. He wanted profit. The industrial world had created a hunger for rubber, and the forests of Congo were filled with wild vines. Leopold imposed quotas on villages, forcing men, women, and children to gather impossible amounts of rubber sap. If they failed, the punishments were unspeakable. Soldiers of the Force Publique, Leopold's private army, were ordered to enforce the quotas with terror. They cut off hands, burned villages, and took women hostage. They killed indiscriminately to instill fear. The severed hand became the symbol of Leopold's Congo. Soldiers were required to bring back the right hand of every victim as proof that bullets had not been wasted. Children, mothers, and old men lost their hands to feed this grotesque system. Photographs from the time still survive, images of Congolese children staring blankly at the camera, their small arms ending in stumps. These are among the most haunting records of colonial brutality. The human cost was staggering. Historians estimate that from 1885 to 1908, at least 10 million Congolese people died from forced labor, starvation, disease, and violence. 10 million lives erased not for conquest or ideology, but for profit. Leopold became one of the wealthiest monarchs in Europe, while Congo was drenched in blood. In Belgium, Leopold cultivated an entirely different image. He presented himself as a modernizer and builder. He used Congo's wealth to fund palaces, monuments, and boulevards in Brussels. Many Belgians admired him as a patron of national pride, but few understood the true source of his riches. He was a king who built parks and museums at home, while abroad his agents mutilated and murdered millions. Leopold's personal life was equally scandalous. He married Archduchess Marie Henriette of Austria, but their union was loveless. After her death, he flaunted his relationship with a mistress half a century younger, Blanche Delacroix, even secretly marrying her in his old age. His lust and greed seemed limitless. By the early 20th century, reports of atrocities in Congo began to leak out. Missionaries, journalists, and human rights activists exposed the horrors. International outrage grew. In 1908, Leopold was finally forced to surrender the Congo Free State to the Belgian government. But by then, the damage was done. Millions were dead, and Leopold had already secured a personal fortune from their suffering. Leopold II died in December of 1909, at the age of 74. He suffered a cerebral hemorrhage in his palace at Laeken. In Belgium, some mourned him as a builder king. In Congo, he was remembered as a butcher. Statues of him in Brussels have since been splashed with red paint to symbolize the blood on his hands. Historians agree he was one of the most ruthless rulers of modern times. He did not kill with swords or spears, but with decrees, quotas, and ledgers. His empire was built not on glory, but on corpses. Thus begins our list, with Leopold II of Belgium.
Number 4. Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia. Vlad III, better known as Vlad the Impaler, was born in the year 1431 in the fortress town of Sighișoara, in the region of Transylvania. He was the son of Vlad II, a nobleman who bore the title Dracal as a member of the Order of the Dragon, a society created to defend Christian Europe against the advance of the Ottoman Turks. From this title came the name that would follow the son through history, Dracula, meaning the son of the dragon. Vlad's childhood was marked by danger and betrayal. When he was still a boy, his father handed him and his younger brother over to the Ottomans as hostages. This was a common practice meant to secure loyalty, but for the young prince it was an education in both cruelty and survival. He lived in Adrianople, the Ottoman capital, learning their language and customs. More importantly, he absorbed harsh lessons, that mercy was weakness, that fear could bend men's wills, and that only ruthlessness guaranteed survival. Years later, these lessons would shape the way he ruled. In 1447, his father was murdered by rival boyars, and his older brother was tortured and buried alive. Vlad, hardened by captivity, resolved never again to be a victim. He fought his way to the throne of Wallachia, a principality lying between Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. His first reign in 1448 was brief, but he returned to power several times, each time more determined and more brutal. Wallachia was a fragile state. Its nobles were divided, its peasants were poor, and it lay on the fault line between two great powers. Vlad believed the only way to maintain control was through terror, and terror became his chosen instrument of rule. The method that gave him his name was impalement. Victims were seated upon sharpened stakes driven through their bodies, sometimes vertically through the torso, sometimes more gruesomely from the rectum through the mouth. The dying could linger for hours, even days, writhing in agony until death brought release. The bodies were then left upright in the ground, a ghastly forest of the impaled that served as a warning to all. The scale of Vlad's cruelty is difficult to comprehend. In one campaign against the Saxon merchants of Transylvania, he ordered thousands to be impaled, their corpses displayed as a grisly warning. During his war against the Ottoman Turks in 1462, Sultan Mehmed II advanced with a massive army toward Vlad's capital. But when they reached the outskirts of the city, they found a field of death, 20,000 corpses impaled along the roads. Men, women, and children all skewered on stakes, stretching as far as the eye could see. Even the battle-hardened soldiers of the Ottoman Empire recoiled in horror. The psychological impact was immense. Mehmed withdrew, unwilling to press forward against such a foe. But Vlad's cruelty was not reserved for foreign enemies. He turned it upon his own people. The boyars who had betrayed his father were rounded up, forced to march, and impaled. On one Easter feast, he invited hundreds of nobles to dine with him, only to have them seized and executed. In another infamous act, he gathered the poor and the sick of his realm into a banquet hall. After feeding them, he locked the doors and set the building ablaze, declaring that he had freed them from their misery. His vision of order was built not on justice, but on fear. Tales of his atrocities spread across Europe. Pamphlets printed in German towns recounted lurid stories of his punishments. Some claimed he boiled people alive, cut off limbs, mutilated bodies, and dined among the dying. Whether all these accounts were true or exaggerated, the image was the same. Vlad was a prince who reveled in blood. he was less a ruler than an executioner enthroned. In his personal life, Vlad was marked by tragedy. His first wife, cornered during a siege of his fortress, threw herself from the castle walls rather than fall into enemy hands. Later he remarried, forming alliances through marriage, but love played little role in his unions. His existence was consumed by vengeance and the maintenance of power. Vlad's death came in the year 1476, during battle against the Ottomans. Some say he was killed by enemy soldiers, others that assassins from within his own ranks struck him down. His head was cut off and sent to the Sultan in Constantinople, displayed on a stake as proof that the terror of Wallachia was no more. His body was buried in an unmarked grave, though legends surround his final resting place. The legacy of Vlad the Impaler is a mixture of horror and admiration. To his enemies, he was a monster. To some of his countrymen, he was a hero who resisted foreign domination with unmatched ferocity. This duality has endured through the centuries, feeding the legend of Dracula that later generations transformed into folklore. Yet beneath the myth lies a grim reality. Vlad was a ruler for whom cruelty was not a last resort, but a principle of governance. He believed fear was stronger than loyalty, and he pursued it with relentless zeal. The death toll of his reign is estimated in the tens of thousands. Some chronicles speak of more than 80,000 victims, many of them not soldiers but peasants, merchants, women, and children. His reign was a theatre of horror, staged not only to punish but to intimidate. His cruelty was not random but systematic, designed to create a reputation that would echo beyond his borders. And so, at number 4 on our list, stands Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia. He was a man who ruled not with laws or love, but with sharpened stakes and rivers of blood. To this day, his name evokes dread, and his legend lingers in both history and myth. He is remembered as one of the most ruthless kings in history, a ruler who believed that terror was the surest foundation of power. Number 3. Ivan the Terrible of Russia. Ivan IV of Russia, remembered to history as Ivan the Terrible, was born in the year 1530 in the Kremlin of Moscow. He was the son of Grand Prince Vasily III and his second wife, Elena Glinskaya. From the very beginning, his childhood was steeped in intrigue, betrayal, and blood. When Ivan was only 3 years old, his father died, leaving him the heir to the throne. His mother ruled as regent. But when she died, suddenly most likely poisoned by rival nobles, the young boy became a pawn in the vicious struggles of the boyars, the powerful aristocratic families of Russia. As a child, Ivan grew up in an atmosphere of neglect and cruelty. Nobles treated him with contempt, starving him, mocking him, even abusing him within the walls of the palace. He learned early that trust was a dangerous illusion. By the time he reached adolescence, he had already developed the cold suspicion that would later define his reign. At the age of 16, in the year 1547, Ivan was formally crowned as the first Tsar of all Russia. The title Tsar was derived from Caesar, a declaration that he saw himself not merely as a prince, but as the sovereign of an empire. At first, the young ruler showed promise. He married Anastasia Romanovna, a woman whose gentle influence calmed his darker impulses. He convened councils of nobles, established a new legal code, created a standing army, and reformed administration. In the early years, he even expanded Russia's territory, conquering the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, victories that opened the Volga River and pushed Russian influence deeper into Asia. For a time, Ivan looked like a visionary leader who might transform Russia into a great power, but tragedy changed everything. In the year 1560, Anastasia died, perhaps poisoned by rival nobles. Ivan's grief was overwhelming, and his suspicion turned into full paranoia. He became convinced that the boyars had murdered his beloved wife, and from that point, he no longer restrained his fury. He unleashed it upon his court, his people, and his enemies alike. In his madness, he created a policy called the Oprichnina. He divided the country into two parts, one ruled through traditional administration, the other under his direct and personal control. To enforce his will, he created the Oprichniki, a black-clad corps of secret police who rode black horses and carried the symbol of the dog's head and broom, signifying that they would sniff out treason and sweep it away. These men became the instruments of Ivan's terror. They roamed across the land, seizing estates, torturing suspects, and executing entire families. The most infamous atrocity of this era was the massacre of Novgorod in 1570. Suspecting the city of plotting treason with foreign powers, Ivan ordered his Oprichniki to annihilate it. For weeks, the city was plundered and burned. Monks were tortured, churches desecrated, men, women, and children slaughtered in the streets or drowned in the icy river. Tens of thousands perished, leaving Novgorod a ghost of its former self. It was not a battle but an extermination, meant to remind all of Russia what awaited those who defied the Tsar. Ivan's cruelty extended into his own household. In 1581, during a violent quarrel, he struck his eldest son and heir, also named Ivan, with his staff. The blow killed the young man instantly. The horror of the moment shocked even the hardened Tsar. He wept over his son's lifeless body, realizing too late that he had destroyed his own future dynasty. The famous painting, Ivan the Terrible and His Son by Ilya Repin, captures this tragic moment, with the Tsar's eyes wide in horror as he cradles his dying son. Ivan's personal life was chaotic and cruel. He married at least 8 times. Some of his wives were divorced, others were forced into convents, and still others met violent deaths. His court was filled with intrigue, shifting alliances, and sudden executions. No one near him could ever feel safe. Despite his cruelty, Ivan was not an ignorant ruler. He was deeply intelligent, capable of writing eloquent letters, and engaging in theological debate. He saw himself as chosen by God, ordained to rule with absolute power. In his mind, his acts of violence were not madness, but divine justice. He believed fear was the glue that held his empire together, and he wielded it without remorse. Militarily, his reign was mixed. His campaigns in the east expanded Russia's territory, but in the west he failed disastrously. The Livonian War, a decades-long attempt to gain access to the Baltic Sea, ended in humiliation. Russia was drained of resources, and its people bore the cost through famine and oppression. By the end of his life, Ivan was a broken man, consumed by illness and paranoia. He spent his final years lashing out at real and imagined enemies. In the year 1584, while playing a game of chess in the Kremlin, he collapsed and died, likely from a stroke. He was 53 years old. His death left Russia in crisis, for he had killed his heir, leaving behind only an unfit son to succeed him. The country spiraled into the time of troubles, a period of famine, foreign invasion, and chaos that nearly destroyed the Russian state. Ivan the Terrible's legacy is a paradox. He centralized the Russian state, expanded its borders, and laid foundations for the empire that would one day stretch across Eurasia. Yet he also terrorized his own people, depopulated cities, and left the country weakened by fear and instability. His reign is remembered less for its reforms than for its rivers of blood. Thus, at number 3 in our list of the most ruthless kings in history, stands Ivan IV of Russia, called Ivan the Terrible. He was a ruler who sought greatness but achieved it through terror, a man who combined intelligence with brutality, vision with paranoia. His reign serves as a warning across the centuries of what happens when absolute power is joined with suspicion and cruelty. He remains one of the most feared figures in Russian history, a Tsar whose name still chills the memory of his people. Number 2. Nero, Emperor of Rome. Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was born in the coastal town of Antium on the 15th day of December in the year 37 after Christ. He came into the world during a time of dynastic turbulence. His father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, was a man of ancient nobility, and his mother, Agrippina the Younger, was the ambitious niece of the emperor, Claudius, and granddaughter of Augustus himself. From his earliest years, Nero's fate was shaped not by his own hand but by the ruthless ambition of his mother. Agrippina maneuvered with great cunning, marrying her uncle Claudius and persuading him to adopt young Nero as his son. She secured his betrothal to Claudius's daughter Octavia, and by the time Claudius died in the year 54, many believed by poison prepared by Agrippina Nero was only 16 years old, yet already proclaimed Emperor of Rome. At the beginning, his reign brought hope. Guided by his tutor, the Stoic philosopher Seneca, and the military prefect Burrus, Nero presented himself as a benevolent ruler. He reduced unfair taxes, granted clemency to political enemies, and organized public entertainments to please the masses. The people of Rome, weary of intrigue, celebrated the rise of the handsome young emperor. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that Nero might rule with wisdom, but beneath the surface of his rule burned desires and obsessions that would transform him into one of history's most infamous tyrants. Nero was not interested in law, administration, or military campaigns. What he craved was the stage. He longed to be admired not as a statesman, but as an artist, a singer, an actor, and a performer. To the Roman elite, this was scandalous. Emperors were expected to embody discipline and gravitas, not to strum lyres or declaim verses. But Nero ignored convention. He forced senators, generals, and nobles to sit through his endless performances. He saw the empire not as a state to be governed, but as an audience to be entertained. As the years passed, Nero's paranoia and cruelty began to emerge. The first victim was his own mother. Agrippina, who had orchestrated his rise, soon found herself excluded from power. Furious, she sought to control him, and in response, Nero plotted her death. His first plan was elaborate. He invited her onto a boat designed to collapse in the sea. She survived, swimming to safety. Enraged, Nero sent assassins to finish the task. In the year 59, Agrippina was stabbed to death in her villa, her body mutilated. Rome was shocked, but Nero claimed it was necessary for the safety of the empire. In truth, it was the brutal cutting of the maternal bond that had shaped him. Not long afterward, his wife Octavia fell victim as well. Accused falsely of adultery, she was exiled and executed. Nero then married Poppaea Sabina, a woman of striking beauty and ambition. Their relationship was stormy. In one notorious outburst, Nero is said to have struck her so violently while she was pregnant that she died along with her unborn child. Whether exaggerated or not, the story reflected the common belief that Nero's temper was deadly and his cruelty without limit. The defining moment of Nero's reign came in the summer of the year 64, when a great fire consumed Rome. For 9 days, flames raged across the city, destroying temples, markets, and entire neighborhoods. Ancient sources disagree on Nero's role. Some claimed he was away in Antium when it began. Others said he returned quickly to organize relief. But the most infamous account was that he stood on a tower, singing of the fall of Troy while his city burned. Whether fact or slander, the image of Nero fiddling while Rome burned seared itself into memory. The fire left him vulnerable to suspicion. To deflect blame, he accused a small, obscure sect, the Christians. Until then, they had been little noticed in the empire, but Nero made them scapegoats. He ordered their arrest, torture, and execution in grotesque spectacles. Some were crucified, others were sewn into animal skins and torn apart by dogs, and still others were burned alive at night to illuminate his gardens. This was the first great persecution of Christians in history, and it etched Nero's name forever in their memory as a monster. In the aftermath of the fire, Nero rebuilt Rome according to his taste. At the center of his new vision was the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a vast palace adorned with marble, frescoes, and even a rotating dining room. Its extravagance outraged the people, who had lost their homes, while the emperor indulged himself in luxury. To them, it was proof that he had let the fire rage in order to clear space for his dream palace. As his reign continued, Nero's governance became increasingly erratic. He neglected the provinces, squandered the treasury on games and artistic pursuits, and drained the state with his excesses. Rebellions erupted in Britain under Queen Boudicca, in Judea, and in Gaul. Governors and generals rose against him. Even the Praetorian Guard, his own protectors, abandoned him. In the year 68, facing revolt on all sides, Nero fled Rome with a few loyal companions. Realizing that capture was certain, he prepared for death. Lacking the courage to kill himself, he begged his companions for help. Finally, with their aid, he drove a dagger into his throat. His last words, according to tradition, were, "What an artist dies in me." He was 30 years old. Nero's death plunged Rome into civil war, the chaotic year of the 4 emperors. Yet his infamy survived long after his body was laid to rest. To the elite, he was a disgrace who had debased the dignity of the empire. To the people, he was remembered with ambivalence. Some missed the entertainments he provided, but many cursed him as the destroyer of their homes. To Christians, he became the very embodiment of evil, the Antichrist, the persecutor who lit the night with human torches. What made Nero so ruthless was not only the number of lives he destroyed, but the theatricality of his cruelty. He turned death into spectacle, executions into performances. He believed himself the star of a grand drama, with Rome as his stage and its people as unwilling actors. His reign was less government than grotesque theatre, where vanity, paranoia, and power produced tragedy on a colossal scale. At number 2 on our list stands Nero, Emperor of Rome, a ruler who murdered his own mother and wife, who watched his city burn, who bathed the early Christians in blood, and who crowned his crimes with artistic arrogance. He was not a guardian of the empire, but its tormentor, a man whose reign remains one of the most infamous chapters in the history of Rome. Number 1. Caligula, Emperor of Rome. Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, remembered by history with the nickname Caligula, was born on the last day of August in the year 12 after Christ, in the seaside town of Antium near Rome. He was the son of Germanicus, the celebrated general beloved by the Roman legions, and Agrippina the Elder, the granddaughter of Emperor Augustus himself. From birth, Caligula's life was touched by both glory and danger. His father was hailed as the hope of Rome, adored by soldiers and citizens alike, yet power in Rome was never safe. Germanicus died suddenly in the year 19, many whispering that he had been poisoned by rivals. The young boy was left fatherless, his family vulnerable to the ruthless intrigues of the imperial household. As a child, Caligula often accompanied his father on campaigns along the Rhine frontier. Dressed in a tiny soldier's uniform, he wore small boots called caligae. The soldiers affectionately nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boots. To them, he was a mascot, a symbol of continuity. But what began as an innocent nickname would one day be remembered as a symbol of madness and cruelty. When Emperor Tiberius succeeded Augustus, Caligula's family fell into peril. His mother and brothers were accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, and executed or starved. Only Caligula survived, spared because of his youth. He was taken into the household of Tiberius on the island of Capri, where the emperor, now old and paranoid, indulged in cruelty and corruption. There, the boy learned harsh lessons. He learned that survival meant silence, that trust was dangerous, and that power, once seized, must be wielded without mercy. In the year 37, Tiberius died, and the Senate proclaimed Caligula emperor. He was only 24 years old. Rome rejoiced at first. The Senate hailed him, the people celebrated him, and the legions adored him as the son of Germanicus. In his early months, he enacted reforms, reduced taxes, released prisoners, and staged magnificent games. The city welcomed him as a savior after the long and joyless reign of Tiberius. For a brief time, hope bloomed, but within months, everything changed. Caligula fell gravely ill, and when he recovered, it seemed as if his mind had shattered. Whether the illness damaged him or merely unleashed what was already inside, the man who emerged was no longer the promising young emperor. He became erratic, paranoid, and cruel. Caligula's reign soon descended into madness. He demanded worship as a living god, ordering temples to be built in his honor and priests to serve him. He appeared in public dressed as deities, sometimes as Apollo, the sun god, other times even as Venus, the goddess of love. He insisted that senators bow before him and that his statue be placed in temples throughout the empire. He planned to erect a colossal image of himself in Jerusalem, an act that nearly provoked revolt among the Jews. In his mind, he was no mortal ruler, but a divine being, above the laws of men. His cruelty was theatrical and sadistic. He delighted in executions, often carried out for his amusement. He would summon nobles to banquets, then order them seized and killed, laughing as terror filled the room. He had prisoners torn apart by wild beasts during games, or executed in front of audiences to heighten the spectacle. Some accounts describe him dining while watching men die, savoring food as screams filled the air. Whether every detail is true or embellished by hostile historians, the consistent image is that of a ruler who treated human lives as toys. Caligula's personal life was equally scandalous. He abducted brides from their weddings, discarded wives as easily as garments, and flaunted relationships that shocked Rome. He exiled his sisters after accusing them of treason, despite having carried on incestuous relationships with them. His appetite seemed limitless, his sense of restraint non-existent. He also drained the treasury with extravagant spending. He built palaces and ships of astonishing luxury. He staged games and spectacles so costly that Rome's finances neared collapse. To raise money, he turned to extortion. He declared that the wills of wealthy citizens left their fortunes to him, and when they had not, he accused them of crimes and seized their estates. The empire itself became a victim of his greed. One story has become legendary: his devotion to his favorite horse, Incitatus. Caligula lavished the animal with a marble stable, jeweled harnesses, and even a house with servants. He is said to have declared that he would make the horse a consul, one of the highest offices in Rome. Whether serious or satirical, the tale symbolized his contempt for the Senate. Elevating a horse above the Republic's traditions was his way of mocking the very foundation of Roman politics. Fear consumed him. He executed senators, generals, and even close allies on suspicion alone. The city of Rome trembled under his unpredictable wrath. To live under Caligula was to live under constant uncertainty. Today, he might shower a man with favor. Tomorrow, he might order his execution. His reign lasted less than 4 years. Yet in that short span, he etched his name forever into infamy. On the 24th day of January in the year 41, members of his own Praetorian Guard, weary of his cruelty and fearful for their own survival, ambushed him in a palace corridor. They stabbed him repeatedly until he lay dead on the marble floor. He was only 28 years old. His wife and young daughter were also murdered, and the Senate quickly proclaimed his uncle Claudius as the next emperor. The reaction of Rome was telling. The people did not mourn him. They breathed a sigh of relief. For in Caligula's short rule, the empire had not been governed, but terrorized. His legacy remains one of horror. Ancient writers, hostile to him, may have exaggerated some details, but the essence is consistent. Caligula was a ruler who abandoned restraint, who confused personal whim with imperial duty, who wielded absolute power as a weapon of vanity and cruelty. His name became a byword for madness on the throne, a cautionary tale for all generations about what happens when unchecked authority falls into unstable hands. And so, at number 1, on our list of the most ruthless kings in history, stands Caligula, Emperor of Rome. His reign was short, but catastrophic. His whims became laws, his desires became decrees, and his cruelty became legend. In his hands, the greatest empire of the ancient world trembled, not before foreign enemies, but before the madness of its own ruler. His story endures as a dark reminder that even the most powerful empire can be undone, not from without, but from within, by the cruelty of one man.